Thanks for coming on. I'm excited to have you. All right, so you just got off stage. You were talking about the shifting consumer, and I'd love to just hear from you. Like, what does that look like to you? Like, who is this new consumer? Obviously, not that they're a monolith, but like, how are you guys thinking about this?
We talked a lot about how there are probably what we are now calling underrepresented groups that used to be a minority, but they might not actually be a minority anymore, including women, right? Women are a majority, but we're still thought of as a minority because we're not equally represented in all of the different areas of the economy, jobs, et cetera.
Congress,
absolutely. So yeah, a lot of what we talked about is how do we start shifting the way that we think as marketers to speak to these underrepresented groups because they're not small anymore. I think there's still this mindset that, African Americans, Hispanics, women are these smaller groups with not as much disposable income or just buying power in general.
Yeah. I mean, in fact, aren't we majority minority or soon to be?
We are. Correct. Absolutely. And a lot of where the spend is starting to happen is across these different groups from gender and ethnicities that are just not really being talked to today. And so we had really great conversation talking about these growth audiences and how important it is to use the right insights and the right data to meet those audiences where they are and be able to properly connect with them, which a lot of brands just aren't even touching right now at all. I think they're just afraid to kind of go down that path or they don't think it's as necessary because of the scale, but the scale is there and it's here.
Yeah. And how are you guys thinking about this shifting consumer? I know we've heard this morning, we were listening to a couple of speakers who were talking about that deeper connection and how do you get to the heart and how do you find your what's already happening kind of out there in culture, and instead of pushing your message out to them, almost integrating into those messages. How do you guys think about that?
Such an important point. The great thing is there's so many social platforms where consumers are creating communities and engaging and having conversations and living their lives on these social platforms. So as marketers, we cannot ignore the fact that we have the information we need.
Right.
It's all there.
Right.
It's who's interpreting the data, how are we using the data and the information. And so by understanding where the consumers are, how they're engaging, what matters to them the most, that's where we as marketers should start then understanding where are the connection points between what our consumers care about and their values and what our brand stands for and our brand values. And it's that intersection point right there in the middle. There has to be that sweet spot there where then you could say, okay, we share these common values or we have the similar interests that get us both really excited. The next step though is how do you create the on-ramp into that without it feeling forced, which often brands make those mistakes.
Yeah, right.
and do. So this is something that's really important. It's really important to us, at the two companies I've worked at my whole career, Unilever and Kellanova. I remember, I very much respect the work that Dove and the Real Beauty campaign has done in the past.
Totally.
Right? They revolutionized how we talk to our daughters and how we bring up the next generation of girls and women. But they've also made mistakes. Everybody does it.
Yes.
And so now it's about how do we find those right on-ramps into the conversations with the information and the data we have and do the best we can with that and make sure you have the right people at the table reviewing it and providing input into it before you just go and run with something.
Yeah. It's interesting. We have all of this data and then we have all of these obviously macro data. And then we have so much is of micro communities and these I guess niche communities and people who are how do you guys think of that when you have this big brand and you have your above the line advertising and you have your sort of macro view and then that grassroots side, the micro communities, how do you think about engaging with them?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's still not something I would say most of us have perfected. Oftentimes still the TV spot is kind of more of a gen pop approach. And then you don't start to see those more niche targets until you get into your smaller segments and audiences through your digital organic channels, et cetera. And we often see that too. But we don't, I think we're just trying to be more conscious of it nowadays.
Yeah.
And so something as simple as, Pringles does a really great job at launching new flavors. And they did a a campaign last year called Enye. And they launched a new flavor, which was jalapeno.
Oh, cool.
And it had the N in it,
Cute.
the Enye,
Yeah.
right? That's in the the Spanish alphabet, right?
Right.
We don't have that letter
Yeah.
or sound in our
Totally.
English
Yeah.
alphabet, but Spanish does. And so they made a whole campaign around
That's cool.
it. They took the product innovation, talked about how difficult it was for English speakers to say Enye, and offered a Duolingo
That's awesome.
subscription to consumers who participated and bought the unique item.
That's awesome.
So they took something that could have been really, really, really small, like a really small insight, and they were able to scale it and make it bigger by what they did with it, through the product, through the promotion.
That's
Through
interesting.
the way they pushed it out through social media, and then the partners that they used, the influencers that they used to help push that message out.
Mm-hmm. That's super interesting. I always think that the international flavors are so interesting. And I've always thought there's like room for a brand at some point to like have their own international store where they
Yes.
had all their different flavors,
I
you
love
know?
that was actually we had tested on Pringles years ago. I lead our direct-to-consumer e-commerce business, and that is an insight that consumers love. They want the treasure chest
Yes.
of the unique flavors and
Yes.
items. It's just so hard to get it into the R&D schedule
Yes.
based on everything else that the brand has going on.
Of course.
So we talked about importing because
Mhm.
around the world, there's so many unique flavors, and consumers love that. They love having access to those unique items, those
Totally.
unique flavors.
Yeah.
It's just so hard in our supply chain networks
Makes
and,
sense.
and prioritization on how to do it.
Yeah. One of the things I always loved is how Kit Kat had a green tea
They do. Yeah.
Kit Kat in,
Yeah.
I think in Japan.
Yeah,
which is
over in
cool.
Europe or in Asia. Yeah, they have really unique flavors.
Yeah.
There are cute little stores. I don't know, when you travel and you'll
Yeah,
find little
there
candy
are.
stores
Mhm.
that will have some of those unique
Yes.
flavors. I love snatching those up.
Me too.
Because they're so insightful in
Yeah.
terms of things that we would never maybe consider. And that's something we talked about is, are those trends? Are those cultural shifts? How do we take those insights? Like, is green tea or matcha, is that a trend?
Mhm.
Is that something that's going to be around for a long time?
Yeah.
How do we evaluate that? So it's so important to constantly
Yeah.
be on the lookout for those little nuggets. And if you understand the context of where that ingredient and that item came from, which audiences in those countries are really excited and interested in that, you might be able to apply it to your brand. So it's great to just continuously be out there exploring and checking out what's different and unique.
Yeah, makes sense. I'm going to switch us gears a little bit. I'd love to just talk to you a little bit about, I know that you're really passionate about and you run the women's initiative at Kellanova, and you're really passionate about, looking at multicultural audiences, but then also really supporting women in the workplace and beyond. Talk to me a little bit about your work with that initiative and why that's so important to you.
Yeah, that's a great question. So as we talked about at the beginning, women are not the minority. We are the majority. But in corporate America, we are often still the minority, especially at senior manager level and higher. And so there's this broken rung that we talk about in corporate America for women, that it's really hard to start making progress at that point in careers. So what I love about the work that I get to do on the Women of Kellanova Plus is help break down the barriers of what is holding women back from being able to get to those next levels. And it's so important to have both women and men in those conversations, because you'd be surprised. I've had some alarming conversations with both men and women, who there are still women that also have a lot of, myths or stereotypes in their head of women, of certain types of women, moms, new moms, people who had gaps in their careers, things of that would maybe hinder how they look at resumes. Similarly, men, and just making sure that we're educating them to pause more often in conversations where there are decisions being made, and make sure that there are representation, different groups and representation in those conversations. Because the simplest thing, like, hey, so-and-so just got back from maternity leave, I bet she probably wouldn't want to take on more
that
right now.
new project.
It's simple stuff like that. And
Yeah.
if there's somebody else in the room who would say, maybe
Let's ask her.
Lauren should make that
Yeah.
decision for herself.
Right.
Let's ask her.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's stuff like that. So just removing some of those barriers and bringing awareness to them has just been so important in the work that we do.
McKinsey did a study of women at work this year, and I think they do it every year. It's the Sheryl Sandberg
Lean In partner. Yeah.
Do they, one of the things that they found was that women are some women who are reaching the middle, to talk about that broken rung, they're either taking a step back or they're going part-time. And there were a couple different reasons that the study found, one of which was they're still doing the lion's share of the work at home. And then I think some of the things that you mentioned, like the biases that still might be in place. So how do you guys think about that when you're, talking about it within the walls of your women's initiative?
It's really hard. That you often see a few things happening at that level. The ones that you mentioned are often exacerbated by the fact that the expectations at those levels change drastically, right? When you get to director, senior director, VP, the expectations on you is that you are more committed to your job oftentimes. You're traveling a lot, you're working later, you're coming in earlier. And if you don't have the support system around you to allow you to do that, it will become baggage on you. It will be seen and is negatively reflected on you. So a few things that we've done and that we try to do, the simplest thing I can tell any leader is that it's really important for the male leaders in the organization to talk about the things that they are doing for their family at work. Like, hey, I have to take my son to the doctor at 4:00. I'm going to leave a little early. I'll log back on later, but that's my choice because I need to finish work.
Interesting.
Or, hey, I'm coaching my daughter's soccer team. I need to leave a little bit early. Or, any of those little behaviors. If the men aren't doing it, then the women won't feel like it's okay for them to do it. And that's something we talk about a lot with our men, who are, especially the ones who are quickly advancing in the organization. Just the importance of that. And now that we have things like paternity leave as well, take your paternity leave. We need you to take your paternity leave so that you can show the organization it is okay and you can still come back, jump into what you've been working on and accelerate your career. It will not hinder your ability to grow.
Right.
So just simple things like that and how we engage with everybody needs to be having the same conversations. Otherwise it becomes this, well, the men do it this way and the women do it this way. But we're all parents, we're all leaders. We're all doing the same things. We're just not talking about it in the same way.
I think the study also mentioned that, when you talk about the lion's share of the work at home, it's also the expectations, and this isn't something that you could do within the walls of the organization, but the expectations of like the people surrounding the family as well. So like the school is always calling the mom, or the expectation is the mom is taking care of the doctor's appointments or the this or the that. And so they're the emergency contact. They're the ones that are sort of on the hook. And like that is an extra whole load of like scheduling and planning that often falls more on women.
Yeah. And you can do everything you want. My husband was a stay-at-home dad for 9 years.
Oh, wow.
I was the career-driven person in our family. He wanted to be a stay-at-home dad. To your point, it did not matter if we had both of our names on and it was his first and mine second. There were so many times where they still called me first. And I would, thank you for calling. My husband is available. You can call him. But this is why it's so important to have these conversations also with women, because it was usually women who were doing that. And it just continues to happen. And I don't want to take my name off of the form because in an emergency, I want them to be able to reach me. But my poor husband went through so many situations like that, or the moms wouldn't even talk to him at like drop off and pick up. Like all the moms are chatting together. And so it was really hard for him to find a community. And until both genders start to cross those lines and the women accept him and see that men can be the primary caretaker in the family and vice versa, we're really going to struggle to make progress in that area.
How many times did you walk into a party and someone asked, like went directly to your husband and said, so what do you do for work, and didn't ask you?
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's so frustrating.
Yeah.
The good thing is my husband's from another country where they don't ask questions about your work. They actually have other things in their lives that they talk about. So it's actually been kind of nice to have that balance. But yes, in this country, and my husband's been judged even by our own family and friends. He feels it too of, what are you doing all day? Like, what are you going to do with your career when you go back to work?
What do you do all day?
What do you do all day? Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's offensive.
That is pretty offensive. That's crazy. Well, I wanted to ask you a little bit about leadership and leading teams and how you think about kind of taking some of these lessons that we're talking about, or some of this like flipping the way that we've thought of things, thinking outside of the box a little bit. How do you think about that as a leader, as you're leading teams?
Yeah, that's a great question. I like to call them my 3 E's. I lead with empathy, empowerment, and energy. Right? If people are not enjoying what they're doing and they're not excited about coming to work every day, that's going to be a big problem. So I try to bring a lot of energy into my team. But first and foremost, I lead with empathy. I try to treat everybody as an individual. When I talk to my people and my teams, I want to know who they are, what are their aspirations, what are their goals, what do they have going on in their individual lives around them? Because if you don't understand the people on your team and what they're going through, it's really hard for them to show up and be their authentic selves at work. And this is something we talk about in our employee resource groups as well. It's so important that we recognize what's happening culturally and externally so that our people feel like they are supported and welcomed at work. And so having that empathy in how we show up as leaders is so important. And I talk about the problems I'm going through as a mom, as a leader, because it helps them be able to then say, oh, yeah, I'm facing the same challenges. I want to lead with that open mindset.
Yeah.
And then similarly, I try to empower my teams. I learned very early on in my career, I was able to take part in a management training program where they told me, they like solicit feedback from all of your peers and your boss. And it was, you have these great ideas, but if you don't bring the people on the journey with you, you're going to get frustrated that they're not keeping up with you. And they're going to get frustrated because they're not able to deliver on your expectations. And so that's something that I do consistently and try to be very conscious of is as soon as we are, setting a new goal or we have a new challenge as a team, we're developing that together. We align on what the vision looks like. What are we trying to accomplish? And everybody understands their role within that so that they can be empowered and go off and do their work without me having to constantly feel like I'm explaining that again because they're not catching up and moving as quickly as the rest of the team.
Yeah. So aligning in the beginning saves a lot of the longer term work. I'm also very bad at that. Like I have ideas and I'm not that great at like bringing people along on the ride. So
it's really hard.
Yeah,
it's like taking the time.
It's a lot of change management work.
Lots of change management. Write it down, make it happen. Lots of different meetings, but it pays off at the end, right?
Absolutely.
Because once you've shared that across all of the cross-functional partners and agency partners that you need to be working on that initiative, they're going and they're able to run with it.
Yeah.
But you can tell when you've forgotten to do it, you're like, oh, why are we so slow?
Why am I so mad?
Why am I getting frustrated that we're not hitting our deliverables?
Of course.
But the more we can empower our teams, I leading now a digital consumer experience team, I don't have the skill set and ability to know how everybody on my team does their job. I want them to be the experts at what they do because everybody has a very unique role that they play and they're subject matter experts at what they do. So if I don't do that, if I don't give them the vision and we create that how we're going to attack it together, we're not going to accomplish it because you're
not going to be able to go in there and
micromanage
tell them. Right, exactly.
in a way that maybe a different team or a different leader could.
Yeah. If you had to give your 25-year-old self advice, what would you say?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think when I was 25, I was getting really frustrated at what some of our leaders were calling rock stars. Like there was a lot of, if you're not a rock star, you can't do this. And I'm one of those people that when you tell me I can't do something, I'm going to go ahead and
figure it out.
Blow that up. Yeah. I'm going to make that happen. And so it's a good thing that it fired me up, but I think I put so much energy into the frustration of it and kind of looking negatively at the people who were getting the praises of the rock star at that age versus saying, what do I need to do to get to the goal that I'm trying to accomplish? And as I look back, I was able to accomplish the things that I wanted to do by demonstrating my skill set, by networking with the right people, and by doing the best that I could at my job and being very intentional about what I was trying to accomplish. And I made it happen. And nobody sat there and said, you're a rock star, therefore that's why it happened.
Right.
It was the intentionality of what I was trying to do. But there are many people in my brain that, I felt like, oh, that person is just... because they were titled that's why they got it. And I didn't need the title. I didn't need that, that pat on the back of like, yeah, you're doing it. And that comparison game
Yeah. There's like a chip on your shoulder a little bit.
can just kill you.
It
And
can.
so the biggest
Compare
piece
and
of
despair,
advice
they say.
I guess to people now exactly is don't compare your progress to somebody else's progress because you might not have the same goals.
And you're
that
running a
person
different
does.
race.
You're running a different race. Exactly.
Yeah. Is that advice you give to your team as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes
And
sense.
we do a lot of work with like diversity org and younger generations, through the community work. And those younger people, every time I have the chance, that is the number one piece of advice I get. Don't compare yourself and your journey to anybody else's. You are unique. And that's what makes you special. Yeah. And then it really depends on what you want to do. Like I could look at you and say, Laura wants to do this the rest of your life. But you could say, I want to go open a coffee shop in 2 weeks.
Sure.
I don't know what you're going through.
Yeah, of course.
And so we can't compare ourselves.
Yes.
And what we're associating are those connection points might not actually be the ones that matter the most.
And are you working on anything that you're super excited for this year? Personal or professional?
Ooh, good question. I'm taking German lessons with my
way.
kids.
That's cool. I was going to ask you if you're, you said your husband's from Switzerland.
Yeah.
If it was German.
They speak Swiss German. Yeah, mostly
Okay.
Swiss German at home, but we can't learn that one. So I'm trying. I took French in high school, so it's been really hard for me to communicate with my in-laws. But we travel a lot. We want to show our kids different cultures, different languages, different communities. And so it's really important that we can show them that we are making the effort and they're taking German lessons. So
Very
I started
cool.
taking German lessons, feeling pretty good about it.
Good for you.
But
That's fun.
personally, that's where my
Yeah,
mental energy
that's great.
goes outside of work. But
That's
we're
great.
really excited for International Women's Day is coming up.
Amazing.
Which is our big annual event every single year.
Oh, what do you guys do for it?
So we have our employee resource group was the first global one within Kellanova. So
Okay.
the women's group was the first. So we're
Cool.
in every single region. We do a global broadcast every year. We're bringing in an external speaker who's phenomenal. She's a career coach, and she is actually going to individually coach a person from every region who signed up to tell their story
Cool.
about how they overcame a challenging experience moment to accelerate their career. And I think this is the first year that we've actually given like hands-on training that those people are going to walk out of that room with a skill that they've never had before. And now that I've done this for a few years, I think that's the hardest part, right? We often go to these trainings, we go to different sessions, we get really excited and inspired, and then we walk out the door and we go back to our day jobs.
Yeah.
And so this is the first time we actually said, you know what? Let's share the voices of our community. Let's let these manager level get on the stage in front of 1,000 people. Our global broadcast usually reaches at least 1,000 people, and have a platform to tell their story, which it's not very often people get an opportunity to stand in front of that size of an audience. It's very nerve-wracking, it's scary, but those are the skill sets that leaders need to be able to continue to grow in their career. So
That's great.
I'm really excited.
Well, congrats to you. That's
Thank
exciting.
you.
Yeah. And thank you so much, Jamie, for coming on. I really
Aw,
appreciate your
thank you.
time.
Thank you. This has been wonderful.